You ever have that one project you keep kind of putting off, you keep meaning to make, and then just like, Well, what better time to talk about the best cards in the first set of Lorcana than halfway between the releases of the second and third sets? Let's talk about the what I feel are the best cards of the first chapter. We're going to go color by color, and we're going to start with Amber. First off, a couple honorable mentions. So cards I think were pretty good, but I don't think quite merit a top 5. But still, bring them up. So first off, we have Spectacular Singer and Stitch Rockstar. They both see a fair amount of play in specific types of decks, but they're only seen in those specific decks. You only see Spectacular Singer in a Steel Song deck, you only see Rockstar in an aggro deck. Outside of those decks, you just don't run those because they're for those specific decks. Another good one is Lord of the Underworld. He used to be seen a lot before we really saw all of the first chapter cards. So in the early Pixelborn meta, there was a lot of Lord of the Underworld play. He's since kind of fallen by the wayside, but I still think he's a solid, good card. And then finally, Palace Horse. Again, in the limited meta before the actual release, having support and bodyguard on that 5-drop, it was really good throwing him out with just in time, but he doesn't really see play anymore. Moving on to the actual top 5. Number 5, You Have Forgotten Me. Now, you're probably thinking, hey, wait a minute, this card doesn't see all that much play either. This card wins drafts, and it's not even funny. If you were doing a draft of the first chapter and you see You Have Forgotten Me, you take that card. Because if you let someone else take that card and you go up against them, you're going to lose. You Have Forgotten Me just totally wrecks the ink curve, making you discard 2 cards and then forcing you to have to choose between having to play a card or having to discard a card. Because without any forced discard, if you just are inking and playing a card every turn, you will naturally, if you're going first, end up at 6 ink, and if you're going second, you'll end up at 7 ink. This drops that down by a solid chunk. So you fully screw over people, and especially if you get to like the last 2 or 3 cards and you just get rid of anything they were saving for later. So yeah, in draft this is very good. Not so much in constructed yet. I think we're still waiting on that sort of Amber Emerald forced discard. I think right now Steel is a better pairing for Emerald, the forced discard deck, but I think we'll probably see a bit more of that. Number 4, Lantern. Lantern is fantastic. It is Amber's source of ramp. Otherwise, ramp really only exists in Sapphire, but Lantern lets you get out those characters faster. I mean, you have the infamous play Stitch New Dog turn 1, play Lantern turn 2, shift out, Stitch Rockstar turn 3. Lantern helps in so many different decks. That's why with the Mufasa Roulette deck right now, the only non-character card people are playing are Lantern. Personally, I think you should run Be Prepared instead of Lantern, both because it's more thematic and also because you can clear the board, and then if Mufasa is banished, you'll have something afterwards. And that deserves its own video. But anyway, Lantern is still really good. And the Mufasa Roulette deck lets you get Mufasa out faster. In the aggro decks, it lets you play more stuff. Like, it is such a good card, and you see it in so many Amber decks. You don't really see it in Steel Song decks specifically, but Steel Song decks generally don't have that high of an ink curve anyway, and they're not really trying to be aggro. They really want to play on curve. Number 3, Lilo Making a Wish. Lilo Making a Wish is just the utter star of the aggro deck. Having that opener where you have her on turn 1 and you can just start questing out for 2 lore immediately, and we'll talk about why that's so good when we get to number 2. You can probably guess what number 2 already is, but Lilo is so good. She sees played not even just in aggro decks. You see some Steel Song lists will run Lilo. You can run her in basically any Amber deck because it's just free lore. As long as you don't get hit by Fire the Cannons, which, let's be honest, no one's really running Fire the Cannons anymore. It's just, you have such a good start to the game. Lilo Making a Wish, we know she's identical to Maleficent Biding Her Time, but I think she's even better than that because she's an Amber. So, Making a Wish, fantastic, number 3. Number 2, Simba Protective Cub. And this is what makes Lilo so good, is because you can do turn 1 Lilo making a wish into turn 2 Protective Cub. If you have that opening, a lot of the times your opponent's just going to concede. Like, what do you even do? There's so little you can do because you have to not only get through Simba and then take out Lilo itself, and most people don't have a developed enough board to really deal with that. And so you can keep questing with Lilo over and over again, and you just get this insurmountable lead so early in the game. And Simba Protective Cub is just wildly... I don't know how they decided this was a balanced card. He has the same stats as a vanilla character for his cost, and he has Bodyguard on top of that. No other Bodyguard in the game has the same stat line as a vanilla card. Hercules, True Hero, has 1 less willpower than he should. You look at Goofy and the rest of them, like, Simba is just ridiculously on curve. The most busted 2-drop in the game. It's ridiculous. But he isn't the most busted Amber card, which is our number 1, Rapunzel gifted with healing. Every single Amber deck runs Rapunzel gifted with healing. Like, what do I say about this? It's insane. You get to draw up to 3 cards while healing a character. Now, we are in more of a meta where it's direct removal. You don't tend to leave damaged characters on the field, but in something like, for instance, the Mufasa deck, or any kind of deck that wants to do some challenges, like you have Maui has run out and killed something and he's still on the board, then you can play Gifted with Healing, heal for 3, draw 3. It's like Dinner Bell, but actually good, because you get to actually keep the card. It sticks around. And, oh my god, Dinner Bell is so bad. But Rapunzel, like, what else can I say about this? She's just a ridiculous card. She's insane. Every Amber deck runs her, and probably will run her for a while. Probably one of the best cards, if not the best card in the entire first chapter. Moving to Amethyst, our honorable mentions. First off, I am tempted to raise her up now that we've seen a little bit more of the Rise of the Floodborn meta, but Ursula Power Hungry, at least in the first chapter meta, she wasn't really seen very much, but she's 3 lore, she's 8 willpower, she draws a card, she drags down your opponent's lore, and I think that's why, especially with the new bounce meta, Ursula's seeing more play. But I think I'm going to keep her in honorable mentions for now. Also in honorable mentions, we have Rafiki, Mysterious Sage. Just, especially in the first chapter meta, having that Rusher out for 3 was very good. It's kind of fallen off, especially now that we've had MetaMim Fox, who has pretty much replaced Rafiki at this point, because she's better. Also an honorable mention, Pascal, Rapunzel's companion. He's a little evasive guy. He's real hard to get rid of. Sees a lot of play, especially in aggro decks, but even not in aggro decks. You just do that. And then finally, Magic Mirror, who, again, was pretty much a staple in Ruby Amethyst decks. Again, now has kind of fallen out of favor. People don't really use it anymore, but still a pretty solid card. It was kind of a meme when the first chapter was still being revealed, because people are paying 4 for a card that's so dumb. But yeah, when it's the only tool you have, you use the tools you have. But now we do have more tools. So let's get into the actual top 5 here. Card number 5, Ursula's Cauldron. It is insane how much difference a deck with Ursula's Cauldron and a deck without Ursula's Cauldron operates. Having Ursula's Cauldron, like, you get to peek at the top 2 cards of your deck, you get this little filtering, and you have a better idea of what's coming up, and you just get better draws. You get, hey, I have a bomb or a 1-drop. Yeah, let's put the 1-drop on the bottom, the bomb on top. You get to do that every turn, every single turn. And since it's an item, it's a lot harder to remove. We see a bit more item removal now that Steel has Benja and Sapphire has Judy Hopps, but still, most people aren't going to target the Ursula's Cauldron. They're going to be targeting other things. So Ursula's Cauldron just makes decks so much more consistent. Number 4, we have another item, and that is White Rabbit's Pocket Watch. Now again, has seen a bit less play now that we've moved to the Rise of the Floodborn meta, but when it was just the first chapter, this was in auto-include in basically every Ruby Amethyst deck, because there's a bit more of an emphasis on challenges, And especially just the threat of rushing out Aladdin Heroic Outlaw meant you were just so scared to put anything on the board. Pocket Watch, especially compared to Cut to the Chase, is an insane amount of value. Just paying one extra ink, over and over again to rush things out, it is very, very good. Card number 3, Maleficent Sorceress. Every Amethyst deck runs her, like every Amethyst deck. Even with Merlin Rabbit, you're still running Maleficent Sorceress because she is cheaper, she is inkable, you can bounce her. Being able to throw a body on the board and also draw a card is ridiculous value. And yeah, every Amethyst deck runs Maleficent Sorceress. Number 2, for the exact same reason, every Amethyst deck runs Friends on the Other Side. Especially the play of turn 3, you play Maleficent Sorceress, turn 4, you sing Friends on the Other Side, you play something else. Even now, in the bounce meta, you're having Madame M. Fox sings Friends on the Other Side, or Merlin Rabbit sings Friends on the Other Side. Friends on the Other Side is an auto-include in every single Amethyst deck, even today. First chapter meta, Rise of Floodborn meta, every deck is running Friends on the Other Side. What more do you need to say? It is ridiculous. You get to draw 2 cards for free. You get to draw 2 cards for free. Why? But number 1, at least for the first chapter, is Elsa Spirit of Winter. Now, in the first chapter meta, this just won games. Being able to tap down 2 opposing characters for 2 turns, and she quests for 3. She's got 6 willpower, so she's pretty durable. And now we have the whole bouncing, so you can bounce her too. Most of the Ruby Amethyst deck lists now tend to run Ursula over Spirit of Winter, but I still think that for the first chapter, in isolation of itself, it is Spirit of Winter hands down. Spirit of Winter is just an insane card and was part of the reason why Amethyst was just so good and so often played in the first chapter. Let's move to Emerald. First off, we have some honorable mentions. Mother Knows Best is a great way to bounce things. It's cheaper removal than, say, Dragonfire or Let It Go. It's not as good of removal because it goes back to hand, but still, it's like most of the time you're forcing your opponent to waste their time replaying that card. Now, in the particular meta where most characters people are playing have things they do when they enter, this is less good because then they get to do that thing all over again. Usually you want to hit something like Aladdin Heroic Outlaw or just a big chonker of a thing who you just don't want on the board anymore. But now we have all these things that they come out, they do something, you don't want them to do something again, so another honorable mention, Tinkerbell Most Helpful. She's evasive, she can give something else evasive, so that can help you snipe an opposing evasive, like a Pascal. Great way to get rid of a Pascal. But just it's pretty solid include in evasive decks. Megara, pulling the strings, is especially good in draft. She doesn't really see play anymore, but you know, she's a nice little addition. Especially that we don't even say Panic doesn't even see play, but still Megara is, you know, a decent honorable mention. And then finally Mad Hatter, Gracious Host, who doesn't see any play anymore, but in the first chapter there were plenty of decks that ran him because he was kind of the only way Emerald had card draw. Now we've got Donald Duck, Perfect Gentleman, but Mad Hatter served his purpose for a while. So let's get into the actual top 5. Number 5 for Emerald, Flynn Rider, Charming Rogue. What a card. He's a solid lore producer, especially since your opponent isn't going to want to challenge into him because they don't want to draw a card, and now he's kind of a centerpiece of this new discard deck, this Emerald Steel discard deck. You play him turn 2, turn 3, you play Prince John, you have Flynn Rider sing Sudden Chill. Charming Rogue is just fantastic. Number 4, Jasper, Common Crook. Being able to deny your opponent a quest is very good, especially when it's another character that has an on-quest ability. So like if it's Hans 13th in Line, or it's Snow White Well-Wisher, or whatever other thing is doing something when they quest, Jasper's like, Nah, you don't get to do that. You don't get to do what you're trying to do. Or especially, oh, that's the one, Arthur. Because Arthur makes a ridiculous amount of lore and also gets to bounce things. With Jasper out, Arthur isn't doing anything. Arthur's just going to sit there. So Jasper, I think, kind of isn't as played anymore, but he really should be. Because he can shut down those aggressive decks very nicely. Speaking of shutting down aggressive decks, number 3, John Silver Alien Pirate. Now, he's a little bit on the more expensive side, but because he does something when he is played, turn 6, he pops out, gives someone Reckless. That is wonderful. The reason why no one really runs Mother Gothel Selfish Manipulator is because you have to wait for her to turn sideways. You play her turn 6, you wait a whole round, and then you have to quest with her. In the meantime, she could just be killed, whereas John Silver does something immediately. And he keeps doing things. You quest with him, he makes something else reckless, and he's got a pretty solid body on his own. So he hasn't seen as much play in Rise of Fulgrim, maybe because everyone's playing Steel Song and Ruby Amethyst, but I still think John Silver's the number 3 card from the first chapter. But our number 2 card, also at 6, also does something when he's played. It's Genie on the Job. Now, I did say that with Mother Knows Best, we are seeing a lot more cards that do things when they are played, so you don't want to bounce them as often. But On the Job is still very good because he has a body that sticks around and he's evasive. So it's real hard to get back at him. He is the perfect crest to the Emerald evasive curve. You go through Never Landing, and you go through Most Helpful, and now you have Ray Easygoing Firefly, and then you top it off with Genie on the Job. You bounce something back to hand. There are still things being played that don't do things when they enter, or like if you're playing against that Amethyst bounce deck, you deny your opponent those targets for their bouncing. But while it would suck to have to bounce like Goat or Rabbit or something, bouncing Arthur is great, among other things. But yeah, On the Job is still fantastic. Just removal on a body is always going to be good. But number 1 is Kuzco Temperamental Emperor. 3 lore, ward, and a death touch. What more can you ask for? Especially before we had things like Lady Tremaine, Imperious Queen, it was almost impossible to get rid of Kuzco. He's coming out turn 5. Even if you're running Ruby, if it's a Ruby Amethyst deck, you're not going to be prepared for another couple turns. So Kuzco's going to sit there and he's just going to keep getting lore. And especially since on the next turn you can quest with him, maybe you've got Shield of Virtue out, or you've got some sort of bodyguard out, or whatever else is going on. Kuzco will often quest multiple times, and it just puts a clock on the game. He's so hard to get rid of. Easily the best Emerald card from the first chapter. All right, let's move on to Ruby. We have some honorable mentions. First up, I've mentioned it prior. Dragonfire it's the best removal card in the game. 5 ink uninkable, yeah, sure, but kill anything. I think people are starting to trim it from their decks because we have other removal options now, but it's still the most efficient removal out there. LeFou Instigator is also pretty decent. He doesn't really merit actual inclusion in most competitive decks now, but it's a great effect, really good in draft. And there are going to be times where you pop him down and just you get to ready someone for either an extra quest or not an extra quest. You ready them for an extra challenge, or maybe you just want them to be ready, or maybe they can sing, just something good. Goofy Daredevil, also an honorable mention, just a great part of that curve of evasives, and especially Daredevil wins drafts. It's not even close. Having that 2 lore evasive at that part of the curve is really hard to get rid of. And then of course we have Brave Little Tailor, another evasive. Doesn't quite make the top 5 cut because he costs so much, and by that point of the game, often he'll just get removed by that Dragonfire, or by next turn someone has a Monstrous Dragon, or whatever else. There's plenty of removal options. He's a real easy target for Mother Knows Best or Genie on the Job. But if he sticks, 4 lore is nothing to sneeze at. All right, let's get into the actual top 5. Number 5, Shield of Virtue. So it has seen a little less play now in the Rise of the Floodborn meta because people aren't really challenging anymore. But in the first chapter, this was just a solid card, preventing people from challenging you, especially if you had it on something with Ward, like Kuzco or Donald Duck Stratton stuff. It just let you keep having that free lore over and over again. It does cost 3 to do every time, but it was just, it's infuriating or delightful depending on whether or not you're the one playing it. A very solid item for Ruby. Number 4, Aladdin Heroic Outlaw. Wow, what a swing. Of 4 lore coming out swinging. You can shift him onto Street Rat or onto Prince Ali and just slamming in. As I was talking about earlier, if you do like Pocket Watch with Heroic Outlaw, it's just an insane amount of value. He usually doesn't get to do it more than once, but even just doing it that once, and he is just the target of all the removal because you cannot afford to let Heroic Outlaw to hit more than once. You just lose if you don't. But not the best. So we go to number 3, Maui Hero to All. The amount of value on this card. So first off, 6/5 for 5. Inkable, that's vanilla stats right there. Now, he is reckless, he doesn't have any lore at all, but he also has Rush. So he is basically Dragonfire on a stick. This is why Dragonfire is an honorable mention. Maui is actually on the list. He's still played now in the Rise of the Floodborn meta. He's played in Bounce decks, he's played in Mufasa Roulette, he's probably played in Popsicles. Like, this is one of the best Ruby cards. It's insane. You have to convince, you need to have a reason to not include him. Let's just say that. Because there usually isn't. Because he's just so good. But moving on to number 2, Be Prepared. This card is so dominant. This is one of the big reasons why Amethyst Ruby is so frustrating to deal with, because you just can't afford to really develop a board, because by the time you get to turn 7, Be Prepared just destroys everything. And you can usually make it fairly one-sided. And as I was talking about earlier, I think Be Prepared should be your one non-character in a Mufasa Roulette deck, because that way you have better ways to deal with opposing boards. You can use it proactively. If you have your Mufasa out, you can quest a Mufasa, you play your Be Prepared, and then Mufasa pulls something out of your deck. Be Prepared is just such a great card. And the fact that we need to have Ursula Deceiver out just to keep it in check. I think we're going to be seeing Be Prepared in basically every Ruby deck for a long time. But it's not number 1. Number 1 has to be Maleficent Monstrous Dragon. Why is Maleficent Monstrous Dragon number 1? Well, because it's 9 ink, it's expensive, you can't really run it in every Ruby deck, and yet she kind of is in every Ruby deck. She's in Amethyst Ruby because she's that top of the curve. She's in Sapphire Ruby because you can ramp into there. She's in Mufasa Roulette because maybe you'll pull her out with Mufasa. She's inkable. She has ridiculous stats. And the fact that she is a removal with a body, she's just better Genie on the job, which is merited in the fact of her cost. If you can get to 9 ink with your deck, or if you can cheat her out with something like Mufasa Betrayed Leader, you run Monstrous Dragon. She really is unmatched right now, and especially in the Amethyst Ruby where you can bounce her. Oh god, she's a little overshadowed by Lady Tremaine Imperious Queen right now. However, Monstrous Dragon you get to pick, so she's better against a wide board. But yeah, Monstrous Dragon, best Ruby card in the first chapter. Let's move on to Sapphire. First off, honorable mentions, Donald Duck Strutting Stuff doesn't really see play anymore, but in the first chapter meta was one of the few ways you could sort of try to deal with Ruby Amethyst. Aurora Dreaming Guardian saw a lot of play in the first chapter meta, particularly in the Pixelborn meta leading up to Actual Reason when we had a limited card pool. Dreaming Guardian was just very good. No one really plays her anymore. But we also have Maleficent Uninvited, which again saw a lot more play before Rise of the Floodborn. Now that we have other options for what she's doing, she's still like a very good card. She has excellent stats for her cost, being a vanilla. Just dropping her out on turn 5, you often kind of struggle to find a way to deal with her. And our last honorable mention is a card that does still see play, actually, which is Mickey Mouse Detective. So there's a few different things you can use for your ramp package. Now that we've gotten 2 sets worth of tools for that. And some decks still run Mickey Mouse Detective. I run decks that run Mickey Mouse Detective because he's just a good part of that curve, but not as good as our full top 5. So let's move to our first top 5. Number 5, Grammatala Storyteller. She's inkable. Oh god, you can play her, she turns into ink. You can ink her, she turns into ink. What I love doing is playing her turn 2 and then having her sing One Jump Ahead on turn 3, and then maybe also playing Mickey Mouse Detective turn 3. She's just so good. And it's really sad how James' role model is just a worse version of her, because you don't want to be playing this on turn 4, you'll be playing this on turn 2, and you also want it to be inkable. She is an auto-include in basically every Sapphire deck. There's no reason to not include her. But moving to number 4, we have Fishbone Quill. Now this one kind of surprised me because just the versatility of it. Being able to ink your uninkables just changes the game. If you can ink like Dragonfire or One Jump Aheads later in the game when you don't really want to be mucking with your deck, when you want to preserve however many copies of things you have left, like, it just makes things so much easier. And it's continual ramp. It's every turn. You can keep using this. And now, especially in the Rise of the Floodborn meta, it's one more item for Hiram Flaversham to be able to destroy and give you card draw, preferably after you've used it at least once or twice. But still, Fishbone Quill is pretty solid. Number 3, Belle Strange But Special. Now, whereas the previous two do still see play, Belle Strange But Special doesn't see as much play, but I think that's more of a factor of Sapphire doesn't see as much play anymore. When you do run into those Sapphire decks, particularly like Sapphire Steel, Belle Strange But Special is still the top line of that. 5 lore, and you get the extra inking every turn, so it's kind of like Fishbone Quill a little bit, although you don't get the uninkables, but still 5 lore. You have to kill Belle if you see her. She's remove on sight, but sometimes she does stick around and she does quest, and she's just so solid. There's a reason why she's still so expensive. But she's not top 2. Number 2 is Let It Go. This is the inkable Dragon of Fire. It is inkable, it is singable. Yes, it does add to your opponent's inkwell, but most of the time you don't really care about that. The fact that it's singable means that you can sing this and you can do other stuff on that turn as long as you have your 5 drop out. It's ridiculously good. Especially, it also gets around Mufasa now, so you just ink him so he doesn't do anything. Just a very solid, very good card. But what's better than a removal spell? Why? Following the pattern, number 1, it's the removal spell on a body. It's Hades Infernal Schemer. He's 7, he's uninkable, but he's still just so good. He's Let It Go on a body. Every Sapphire deck runs Hades Infernal Schemer, let's be honest. Why wouldn't you? I am still frustrated he's the only first chapter legendary I still haven't pulled any copies of yet, but he's amazing. I would love to get actual paper copies of him and put him in my decks because he's so good. You can put him in any Sapphire deck, absolutely any, because any Sapphire deck is going to get to 7 ink in a reasonable amount of time. You're going to be able to use him. And again, it's removal on a stick. He's kind of that perfect medium between On the Job and Monstrous Dragon, where On the Job is the cheapest, but he bounces to hand, so you still get it back. Monstrous Dragon just fully removes, which is pretty expensive. Hades is nice and in the middle, fully removes. You do give your opponent a little bit of ink, but they don't get to use the card again. Infernal Schemer is just a ridiculously good card. All right, let's move on to our last ink color, which is Steel. So for our honorable mentions, Smash and Fire the Cannons both they're good solid removal. No one really uses Fire the Cannons anymore. People do still use Smash here and there, but especially in the first chapter, especially before Official or recently had a smaller amount of card pool, every Steel deck ran these cards. They were just primo removal that let Steel be fully dominant against aggro decks. Tekka Heartless is another solid one. I like running her. She is a little expensive. She's kind of worse Heroic Outlaw, but if she can swing, if she sticks around and can swing, she's very nice. Sees zero play in Rise of the Floodborn right now. I really want to see more of her. I really hoped the Ruby Steel challenging deck that we got Shere Khan and Queen of Hearts and Pick a Fight and Jafar Dreadnought and like all these tools for that deck, and it's just not happening because Ruby Amethyst is still so dominant. Heartless is a great fit for that deck though. And then the last honorable mention is Captain Hook Forceful Duelist. The best one drop in the game. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, your arguments for Lilo Making a Wish, but it's Forceful Duelist. Forceful Duelist is the best one drop in the game. All right, let's go to our actual top 5. Number 5, Hans 13th in Line. Now, Hans 13th in Line doesn't really see play in competitive. I really think he should, because he's very, very good. He quests, he kills something, especially when you have multiple of these in play. And I think we're seeing it more now with Robin Hood Capable Fighter, because he's cheaper and you can start doing that earlier. But Hans does that and he quests. He gets you to lore when he's doing it. He's just so good. 13th in Line really should see more play in more Steel decks. Now, granted, the most popular Steel deck right now is Steel Song, and there isn't really room for him in that deck. But beyond Steel Song, if you're running a Steel deck, you should put 13th in Line in it. He's really good. All right, number 4, Beast's Mirror. Again, Rise of the Floodborn meta, no one plays Beast's Mirror anymore because there's so many other options for card draw. But in just the first chapter, and especially in that sort of pre-release meta, Beast's Mirror was just so good. It was Magic Mirror, but better. And you usually wanted to ink and play every turn so you could get yourself down. And then once you were at that empty hand, you were just drawing. It was so good. It made people run Beast hard-headed so you could kill the opposing Beast's Mirror. Just a solid card in this particular set. But number 3 is kind of what made people not run Beast's Mirror anymore, which is A Whole New World. This card is often a trap. Like, you often help your opponent more than you help yourself, especially if you're not syncing this. But if you are syncing this, this is number 3, not so much because of helping you win so much as it changes games up so much. Getting that hand refill, you have access to so much more stuff now, and you usually are able to dump what your opponent is doing. So they're like holding on to like Be Prepared or something like, no, go away, bad. This is just, it's a stupid card. It's a free Wheel of Fortune, as many people have said, but it's not the best card Steel has in the first chapter. So let's move to number 2, which is another song. It's Grab Your Sword. Oh my god, when this card was revealed, it fully changed the Pixelborn meta. It's so ridiculous how good this card is. It's so one-sided. It's singable. It trashes aggro decks. It doesn't do as much against like the higher willpower decks. But even like Ruby Amethyst is running like lower willpower things right now with the Olafs and Rabbits and things like that. But still, ridiculously powerful card. Especially when it's sung by the number one pick, you can probably guess, is Tinkerbell Giant Fairy. What do you even say about this card? It's insane! You play her, she does something on entry, deals 1 damage to everything, she hits something, she does another 2 damage to something else, and she's shiftable! Every single Steel deck plays Tiny Tactician turn 3 and shifts out Giant Fairy turn 4. It's like clockwork. Even now that they're starting to run like the Cinderellas, they're still running the Tinkerbells because Giant Fairy is just so stupid good. This is a ridiculous card. Why was this card printed? That's kind of been the theme of all these number ones is, why was this card printed? It's so good. It's so good. Alright, so these have been my top cards for the first chapter. Please hit the comments below if you agree, disagree, if you think I'm stupid, if you think I'm a genius, whatever. Just get in the comments talking about it. Give it 3 months and I'll do one of these for Rise of the Floodborn. But I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful whatever day this is for you.